Hi, I'm Michael Galloway, music business and songwriting coach, and as I promised, we're going to continue to talk about the secret of making money in the new recording industry. So what's happened? Some things have changed. Some things have changed over time, and there are wheels turning that are so big we can't even see them half the time. We can see little increments, but let me put it together for you. I'm going to connect some dots. So over the last 75 to 100 years, actually a little bit more than that, this whole thing's been developing the record industry. Now there's this guy you may have heard of by the name of Steve Jobs. And I know there's a lot of Apple haters out there, but when you've changed the world, when you've got a person who's changed the world with their ideas, you probably ought to pay attention to them because they might know a few things. Steve Jobs talked about innovation cycles that industries go through. It's really important to pay attention to these right now because it's having a deep effect on what we're doing as musicians, particularly if we want to record and release our own music. So there's a gentleman out there that was a colleague of Steve Jobs by the name of Guy Kawasaki. I highly recommend you look him up. Go see some of his TED Talks that are out there, TED Talks. Great stuff. But he talked about illustrating Steve Jobs' understanding of innovation cycles with the industry of ice. It's like ice, okay, that's weird. It's a little removed from us, but stay with me here. Ice has gone through at least 3 innovation cycles. What was Ice 1.0? Ice 1.0 was people in ships or with carts and, wagons or whatever, going as far north as they could, cutting ice out of glaciers, out of lakes or whatever, packing them onto their vehicle and shipping them south until things started to melt. And then they would brush that ice off and sell it. Okay, that's great. Ice 2.0 became much more mechanized because there were people that invented refrigeration systems and created ice-making factories that now could sit on the equator. You could have ice wherever you wanted to have ice. So that was pretty neat. And by the way, it changed everything. And so, basically they'd make a factory in Sao Paulo or wherever. They would distribute ice there through, trucks or horse-drawn carriages or wherever the timing was at that point. And then suddenly somebody came along and invented a much cheaper, easier to afford system that you could have in your house. And that was a refrigerator and ice maker. And suddenly you were into Ice 3.0. I want you to pay attention to these 3 curves and what happened, because there's some macro stuff to think about. Number 1 is 1.0 is often very labor intensive. It requires an awful lot of paying attention to details and handcraftedness, and there's not a lot of mass production, because that's 2.0. 2.0 is mass production, bigger distribution systems, less specialization on the places that carry your product and that kind of thing. 3.0, you tend to bring the capability down to the individual level. Individuals now have the capability to create this product that they were buying from somebody else. And the real shift is that they're being sold the equipment to do so. Now, some of the manufacturers, some of the people involved around the edges, we always used to say they're not digging for gold, but they'll sell you the shovel. Those companies actually may transition from one to the next, particularly from 2.0 to 3.0. So there's also something else to pay attention to. Actually, 2 more things. Folks that invested in 1.0 typically don't invest in 2.0. Folks that invest in 2.0 don't invest in 3.0. Why? It's because when they've invested their money in ships and people and systems to go up and drag the ice out of the Northlands, and they decide to turn around and invest in ice-making factories, they bring on the demise of their first investment, and so they're not going to do that. And if they've invested in ice-making factories, they're probably not going to invest in the companies that make the personalized device, in this case the refrigerator, because it's going to hasten the demise of the investment they've made in their factories. And there's one other big signal I want you to realize in going from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, and that is the distribution mechanism changes. And that's important, and it is signaling us right now that things have changed. Now these cycles, these innovation curves, if you will, can take decades, maybe 100 years sometimes. They take a long time, but they've sped up the more technology and civilization has developed. At least in my mind they have. In the book that I'm writing, I talk about energy, if you want to go in depth into something that is really fantastical, and how the innovation curves are happening there. And talk about the amount of money involved. My God, it's unbelievable. But getting back to the record industry, so 1.0 was people like Edison handcrafting practically these scrolls. You had to record your master after making 75 copies, so there was no real huge mass production. And they were sold in very specialty type shops. The second wave was large investment companies, and basically created these businesses like Deutsche Grammophon and RCA and Sony, who developed ways to press records en masse. And so now you could have hundreds of thousands, or you could have millions of records, and it didn't matter, by the way, too much if the product changed itself, if the distribution model stayed the same. We were still in 2.0. So we had 78s, and we had 33 and a third RPM records, and we had 45s, and then we had 8 tracks and cassettes, and then finally comes along, reel-to-reel was another one, and finally comes along the CD. But the distribution model was always the same. They were either done in stores, that is, they were sold in stores, or they were done through mail order. So everything stayed pretty much the same until, over the last 15 years, there has been a huge change, a slow demise of 2.0 as 3.0 comes in. And what is that signaled by? It's signaled by the fact that we can record for ourselves. We have a distribution model that's almost free, which is our MP3s and our WAV files and that kind of thing. We can sell these things through the internet without having to create physical product. It doesn't necessarily mean that some of the vestiges of the 2.0 are not around, but they become very special. For instance, the CD and the wax record, the 33 RPM record, are not dead, but they're specialty items now because we can sell them at our concerts and charge money because they can be autographed. You can't autograph an MP3. So the whole thing's changed, and we are now in 3.0. 2.0 is slowly dying. It's a very ugly time, but there's some negatives for sure, but there's some huge positives that I want to show you how to take advantage of, and that's what's coming up next. Please subscribe to this channel. I'm Michael Galloway, and I'll be back with some great stuff. Thanks.